So what came first, the job at Tinder or the husband from Tinder?
The husband at Tinder.
Okay, tell us the story.
Okay. I used all the dating
ultimate
apps.
marketing tool for Tinder
know.
is you. Yeah.
It's cliche.
On today's episode of the Fahrenheit podcast, we are welcoming Stephanie Danzi. Stephanie is the Senior Vice President of Global Marketing at Tinder, where she's leading one of the most recognizable and culturally defining brands in the world of connection. A rare blend of creative storyteller and analytical thinker, Stephanie has reshaped how Tinder shows up in the world. From launching its first ever global brand campaign, It Starts With a Swipe, to navigating how a new generation redefines love, dating, and identity. And as a Tinder success story herself, she met her husband right there on the app. Stephanie brings both personal insight and professional clarity to a space that is as intimate as it is influential. Welcome, Stephanie.
I used all of the dating apps
amazing.
For many, many years.
Yeah.
Like many people imagined when I moved to New York, I'm going to be like meeting men at art galleries like Sex and the City.
Oh, yeah.
And that didn't happen for me. After I graduated, Tinder came out and I started using it. And I used that and all of the apps for many years until I met my husband. And I often joke the only bad thing about meeting my husband was I wasn't able to talk about dating apps all the time. Because dating is not, it's about finding your person, but it's also a way that you bond with other women. Like,
Definitely.
The brunch after the date is just as fun as the date itself.
That's the one thing Sex and the City got right.
100%.
No question.
100%. But then I ended up going to Match Group, which is Tinder's parent company. And that's actually part of why I felt called to go there. So I spent almost a decade at PepsiCo doing classical brand marketing, and I got to do, a massive Super Bowl campaign. I got to do, amazing advertising for these multi-billion-dollar brands. And in my last role there, which was on Mountain Dew, which is when I got to lead our NBA partnership and work with Kevin Hart and Morgan Freeman and all these amazing people, I was like, this has been an amazing ride. The ECD at BBDO said to me, "You've done more this year than many marketers dream of doing in their whole career. So what are you going to do next?" And I was like, oh, what am I going to do next? And so that's when I started thinking, what do I want? And I had actually always imagined myself as an entrepreneur, which hasn't happened yet. Who knows? Maybe one day. And I found this opportunity at Match Group to launch a new dating app for them. So it's kind of the perfect hybrid of professionally, I got to have a little bit of a taste of a startup, be part of a founding team, bring something to market, but also personally, it was really fun to be back in the dating space and talking about dating all the time. And again, being at the parent company that made me meet my husband. So it was kind of a match made in heaven. Have you used the dating apps?
That's incredible. I use the dating apps for like a really brief moment in time.
Okay.
And I felt like lucky in a sense that I got to experience it in some capacity. Definitely as a marketer, I was like grateful because I think one, I kind of became surprisingly single after I had gotten married. So I got married and then I became divorced. Never thought that I would experience the dating apps, if I'm being honest, because I had started dating my ex-husband prior to the boom. So I had just missed the window. And then when I became single, to be honest, I had no shame. Like, I think that you should be ruthless in your pursuit of life, of love, of whatever it is that you are craving. And if apps is a new form or way to get that, I think it's like an incredible thing and tool. And I was really, more than anything, super curious. So I went right on the apps and I like really experienced them and loved them for a short moment. And then started to date my partner, Simon, who I had known for like 15 years and was right under my nose the whole time.
Wow.
We jokingly are like, we were right there under each other's noses the entire time. So like a little bit of a hint of it. I do think what's interesting is that like the dating apps fundamentally changed the way that we look at dating, right? Like obviously it used to be so much of that. I hope I bump into someone in the coffee shop in New York or opening a cab and, what the rom-coms have kind of like taught us. The apps really shifted the way in which dating is perceived. Like how at Tinder and in your experience at Match more broadly, like have you thought about leading that change and what dating today really means?
I do. I feel extremely privileged to have the role that I have because first off, as a marketer, to work on a category that people actually care about.
Yeah, it's like a necessity in some capacity. Yeah.
It's amazing. People
Yeah.
talk about dating on social all the time. It really matters. I mean, I loved my time at Pepsi and with other brands I've worked on, but it's very different to be working for something that is such a core, fundamental human need. And we do take it really seriously that Tinder is a place that people learn how to date. While I agree, of course, technology has evolved. I do think there's a little bit of a nostalgia for meet cutes that never really happened, right?
Definitely.
Like I said, when I moved to New York, I totally thought, oh, I can't wait for the Sex and the City life. And that reality isn't true, right? People think, oh, I miss the times when everybody went to the grocery store and reached for the same perfectly ripe avocado. But that isn't really the case. What I will say that we see as a generational difference in perception with Gen Z and dating apps versus other generations is actually reminiscent of your story. I hear some of the best feedback from people who are straight out of a long-term relationship because they remember the way you used to date is actually like you're at a bar, you see somebody,
Definitely.
You're like, I hope they're single. I hope they're into me. You have to go talk to them. You might even have to buy them a drink to approach them, right? It was super vulnerable. And so Tinder and dating apps in general totally changed that by removing a lot of the rejection. On the flip side, Gen Z, who came of age as dating apps were the known go-to way to date, they never really had to experience that IRL tension and nerves and butterflies. And so while dating has always been hard, they kind of conflate dating apps are the reason that dating is hard.
Interesting.
Which I don't think is actually true. But like I said, of course, dating apps are part of culture and we do all kinds of things to try to make sure that we are being really a positive force on the culture.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, how do you, I don't want to say combat that, but how, like, as a marketer, do you navigate around that? And that could be specific to, like, what you're facing at Tinder, let's say with Gen Z, but even more broadly, like, as a marketer, you're faced with, like, a product market fit or a perception challenge or a shift as you try and talk to new demographics, psychographics, audiences. Like, how do you combat that and work around it?
Yeah. I mean, Tinder is universally known pretty much around the world.
Yes, brand awareness is high.
Yes, brand awareness is high. So it's a brand perception job for us to do.
Or like product perception.
And product perception.
Yeah, like dating.
And
dating is the
innovation.
product. Yeah.
Yeah, right. It's in many ways, Tinder is the category. Look, it's actually the number one way that people meet. It's the number one source of relationships. And yet when I say Tinder, that's not what people usually think of first, right?
Yeah.
A lot of the job that I've been focusing on over the last few years is how do you remind people of the other truth of Tinder, which is really that there are success stories and that you can find a meaningful connection. Part of what I see as my team's job to do is to remind people that connection feels good and is worth it, right? It is hard. It's hard to prioritize putting yourself out there and facing getting rejected or getting ghosted or whatnot. But when you do find that special someone and you find a spark, it feels good. And so, one example of a recent campaign we did had the tagline, it doesn't have to start like a rom-com to end like a rom-com. And it takes real DMs, real first messages from Tinder and paints them as dialogue in different rom-com scenes.
I love that.
And it's really cute. It's really feel good. And it kind of celebrates the reality of the positive of dating. Similarly, we're extremely lucky that we have Jason Kelsey and Kylie Kelsey who met on Tinder.
Literally was going to be my next topic.
Dare I say Taylor Swift's future in-laws?
Yep.
And their story is so weird and awkward. He fell asleep at the bar and whatnot. And I think it's nice to tell those stories. But on the flip side, I think it would be disingenuous to go out there and be like, Tinder is all sunshine and rainbows, right? And ignore the downside. So we also do a lot of social listening and how do you intercept people who are having a tough time dating?
Yeah.
Right. And that can look like, recently, maybe at some point last year, there was this woman who went viral for a guy ghosted her because she posted a TikTok about her purse collection and he got the ick. And she wasn't really a known creator or influencer, but, she got like 2 million views on this. So we sent her a new Coach bag and a year of Tinder, and she unboxed it. The video got almost 2 million views, and all the comments were like, Tinder ate with this, and like so happy that Tinder, she actually didn't even meet the guy on Tinder, but just meeting somebody in this negative moment and acknowledging that, I think actually goes a surprisingly long way.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because that nostalgia that you talked about, something I'm curious to hear from you is like, just because dating in the product that we were talking about today maybe isn't mechanically the same as it used to be. It's not a similar product as it used to be, but that feeling can still be evoked, right? And as a brand strategist, and you do obviously like, every form and facet of marketing as you're leading marketing at Tinder, but how do you bring in, and is it important to bring in that feeling of nostalgia, that feeling of connection, right? Not exactly what you maybe get in that initial DM, but what then is created in that feeling of meeting the right person or meeting the right person for right now, right? Like you still get that feeling. I think that has not changed, which is sort of fun to think about, that while the way in which we date has changed, the feelings arguably are still so universal.
I totally agree. I think dating is interesting in that it is so personal, but also so universal. Yeah, right. Hopefully everybody's had the magical feeling of a crush. Unfortunately, everybody's also probably had the feeling of that not being returned, right? And so a lot of our briefs are rooted in, how do you bridge somebody from hopeless to hopeful? How do you remind them that it can be worth it, and that we don't focus as much on outcomes because we do believe all possibilities are valid. It doesn't have to last to matter. But showing that kind of connection, that romance, that feeling, I think goes a surprisingly long way with people. Probably
some of my most failed, and I use that word sensitively, relationships have been the most impactful in my life. I have a mindfulness teacher here in LA. She is a professor at UCLA, a speaker at UCLA. And one of the things she said to me in my very first session with her, I had just gone through a breakup of somebody that I was living with for 5 years. We were dating, in love, but ultimately kind of realized we were not marrying each other. Like we had kind of come to like an impasse.
Interesting.
And it was an act of letting go of something for something greater. Like we kind of could have probably done it for years longer, but I wanted more for my life and for myself. And she said to me in this session with her, not everyone you meet is meant to be a resident. Some people are meant to be visitors. And I think about this a lot now. When I meet people, when I build relationships, sometimes I'm like, that person is not a resident. They're a visitor. They're here for a year, for 2, for 3, for a moment, and the lessons that you can learn from them. And I look back at men that I had dated in the past, partners I had, relationships I had, and I'm so grateful because the failed ones, I think, quote unquote, failed, which I don't think of them as failures now, the ones that ended, that were visitors, in some ways were the ones that taught me the most, where I grew the most, and where I learned so much about myself. And, you had said dating, a lot of it is about, uncovering kind of like what you want with a partner in the world. But I think it's also a lot of uncovering who you are in the world. Like my years of dating and those brunches with my girlfriends, after the first bad date or the breakup or the makeup or whatever it was, I think so much self-discovery occurs. Do you guys ever think about the journey that people as individuals are on, not when they find the partner, meet the partner, or connect, but also as an individual, like how they're experiencing themselves in their life?
I love that resident, by the way. And we do have a value that we talk about of it doesn't have to last to matter for that exact reason, right? Any relationship, whether it's for a night or for a year or, any duration, should make an impact on you and should help you get clearer. One of my favorite insights that I've seen working in this category now for 6.5 years.
An expert in dating.
Every single person will tell you, I know exactly what I want and I haven't found it yet. He's 6'2", he's an architect, he makes this much money. I think people do struggle to realize that actually maybe you should be thinking about like, I want somebody who makes me feel seen. I want somebody who supports me in this way, right? Or whatever those connections are, should be something a little bit deeper. And, we do talk a lot about how do you make the product experience one that can nudge people in the right direction of finding the right kind of compatibility. So it isn't, Tinder does have a philosophy overall that there's no single algorithm. There's no, it would be amazing if and who knows, maybe AI will get there, but
yep.
I don't know that it will, right? I don't know that there actually is an algorithm for, you and your partner are absolutely perfect together and an algorithm can figure that out. There's just sort of a, ephemeral quality that makes you connect with somebody. And so, we do think about what are the different ways that we can nudge you to get out of your comfort zone. And even Tinder is one of the few dating apps that does not have hard filters. So you can basically filter on age, location, and gender, which is a pro and a con for people, right? A lot of people are saying, well, I want to filter for that checklist of finding the architect. But on the flip side, so many of the success stories that I hear are actually around, oh my gosh, I would have filtered this person out in any other circumstance. But I didn't know their height. I didn't know their religion. I didn't know XYZ about them. And it turns out that they're actually the right person for me, which I think is really cool.
No question. Having been through a divorce, I think first and foremost, my entire job was just to survive. Like the first step was like survive the divorce, then figure out how you get your bearings again. And at a certain point, you start to lift your head up for air and say, okay, like what's next? And I think because I had been through that, the position and the place I was coming from at that time was very much like, I'm looking for a partner. I was in my mid 30s, closer to my late 30s. I had been through the ringer. I had started my company, and I really was, for the first time in my life, like all the things I thought that I wanted, I put out the window. And it was the things I felt like I needed that I was prioritizing. And I think because of it, I was coming at my dating life from like a very open place. And when, my partner Simon and I ended up going out, I remember thinking to myself, me 6 months ago would have never been on board with this. And not because he's the greatest, but because at that time, he, just an example, he was older. He is older. I generally wasn't dating men who were older than me. Had I had that checklist, he would have never come through that filter. And so I think it really is also about like prioritizing for yourself what is important, and realizing that some of the preconceived notions we have are not, to your point, going to get you actually to the thing you need. It may be something you want. I mean, I'm sure a lot of us want a lot of things, but what is really important for me, I think, are the things that have served me and that I feel so grateful. In some ways, going through the divorce gives you a lot of perspective that every day I wake up and I'm just so grateful to have them, because at some point I didn't and I lost them. So I guess for you, like, how are you guys thinking about, and you had mentioned AI, right? How are you thinking about continuing to serve that mission, which is, not believing in a single algorithm, but ultimately trying to get people to whatever it is they're looking for, whether that's the soulmate or the one night stand or their partner, how do you think about it as a marketer continuing to push and nudge people in that direction?
Yeah. We look at holistically where are the things that we can help with dating. And I mentioned a lot of people learn how to date on Tinder. It's a rite of passage for a lot of people. When you turn 18, you download Tinder. It's actually, we play a really big role in a lot of queer people's self-discovery, where they're out on Tinder kind of figuring out their sexuality before they're out in real life. But actually, one of the things we have recently been playing around with is, how do you get people more comfortable asking somebody out in real life? So actually on April Fool's Day, we launched something called the Game about, it's a game about, do you have game? Do you have Riz? And it's silly. Like, it's very silly. It's a silly experience. It was a partnership with OpenAI. It's really a flirting simulator. And there are these outrageous scenarios. Some of them are like fantastical scenarios. But it is this experience where you try to flirt with a bot. And look, it's kind of uncomfortable. It's kind of, the first time I tried it, I was like, oh man, I'm out of practice and this is sort of weird and whatnot. But the feedback we're getting on it is actually pretty positive, because people don't have a safe, like, what are you going to do? Go call a friend and say, can I practice flirting with you? Like, that's really vulnerable and weird. Or, you go out and you get rejected all the time. And so, look, I certainly don't think the future of dating is like with bots, flirting with bots, whatever. But I do think there are all of these tools and safe spaces that you can potentially create with AI. And I am interested, we look a lot at, how can AI enhance you? How can it make you your best self, right? How can it make you feel comfortable showing up on a date and flirting? Or we have an AI photo finder. Like, a lot of men in particular, but everyone doesn't know what photos they look good in. And this is just a click of a button will help surface for you. Hey, this is what people are going to be interested in, right? So, I do think there's a lot we can do to help set people up for success as they enter the dating world.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's about how you're enhancing the experience and fostering people's comfort level, I think, through those tools and through that technology enhancement. Although I will say I feel like I flirt with ChatGPT all day. Right, thank you so much. You're my best friend like 4 times a day. So I would love that product. I would love that. Obviously the shift that you've taken in your career from Pepsi and then to this world of dating. One, I think it's so interesting of kind of like what was the biggest shift for you as you made that shift? And what do you think has been the most valuable lessons that you've learned in each of those worlds as a marketer?
Yeah. When I made the shift from CPG to tech, I found tech was very precious about like, we're our own thing. It's totally different. And, you've hopped between industries.
Yeah.
So, at the end of the day, if you are a brand marketer, it's all about what are the consumer problems to solve? What's the cultural context? What's the business way that we can solve it? And how do you drive growth that way? So I have found that to be true across companies. What's been different in tech is from a marketing perspective, attribution's a totally different ballgame, which also just means the expectations for marketing are very different. So at Pepsi, there is 100 years of ads of all kinds. They know it works. They know branding is important. You cannot do direct attribution. So there's no expectation that you're able to say, this TV spot drove this amount of case sales. Yeah. Of course, you do marketing mix modeling and, you're not operating blind, but it's not the same level of, I can go spend money on performance spend and find somebody who I definitively know, paid, spent money, it was positive ROI. But especially working in dating, it's an ecosystem. Yeah. So it's actually not great to find the same profile of people who pay. I need to find the people who don't pay that, other people want to meet and whatnot, and make sure we have the right gender balance and the right ecosystem composition overall. And then, of course, as a brand marketer, also, I'm a huge believer that you have to build a brand for long-term growth, right? Performance can only work efficiently if you have a brand people like. So I love how fast-paced it is, how much you're in the palm of people's hands, the scale that you can get just from like a push notification. I'm like, this is massive scale, right?
Yeah.
But I also spend a lot more time with our CFO talking about how do I prove out the business case for brand? How do I, use direct attribution where I can, but also in areas where I can't, like what's sufficient to be building the case that this is the right way to invest.
This is such a hot topic. And I think it's funny, like no matter what generation of mine in my career that I've been in, no matter what category, no matter what company, this sort of balance of like, I want brand, but it's the last thing I want to invest in, right? Or I like marketing, I always joke, is like the first to get blamed and the last to get credit, right? Yeah. It's sort of this like age old story. And I do think that you said it so well and perfectly, which is the only way that paid and performance marketing is really efficient is when there is that brand. How do you fight for brand? Like for someone who's listening right now, who is a brand marketer and who's like, no one wants to invest. Everything I do get, I can't attribute every dollar to that performance. How do you fight? Like, I'll tell you how I fight for it, but like, how do you fight for brand?
I would love all your tips.
How do you fight for brand? And like, really, how do you get, because obviously I think what's interesting too is both for, Pepsi, but also now really at your time at Tinder, you've launched incredible campaigns and you've really helped to bring Tinder to not just the forefront as a dating app, but also as a brand. It's well known, it has massive awareness. So brand is branding. I guess, how do you get it there and how do you fight for that internally?
Yeah. So, when I came to Match Group, and again, it was for a smaller startup at the time, the CEO of Match Group at the time, Mandy Ginsberg, actually said to me, we know that branding is kind of the future of this category, and we know we don't know how to do it. Yeah. So we sort of need you to come in and help teach us how to do it. So I did know what I was getting myself into. And it's certainly helpful being in an environment where there is at least that curiosity, right?
Definitely.
What I try to encourage with my teams is thinking about what is safe to try. And for any type of marketer, right, what is safe to try is going to be different based off of your own brand and context and spend level, right? So that could be social. Like nobody's really paying attention to our owned social. Maybe that's an area where you can kind of mess around and start to see what sort of branding sticks, right? What sort of content is resonating with people. Maybe you can approach influencers and figure out a formula and get traction there. And then as you're building traction, you can go showcase, hey, look, like we put out this message and 500,000 people viewed it and liked it, right? Maybe we should be doing more. Best case, you're actually seeing a lift in sales metrics at the same time. So I think it's like, what are the different things that you can carve out? And hopefully you can take bigger swings as well. For Tinder, when I actually first joined Tinder, there was no product marketing team. And I joined with actually no job description. They created a role for me because the app that I had been working on just never reached product market fit. And so, what I really did was look around and say, who are the allies who will lean in with me and help me do cool things and build something up? And
I love that, allies.
Yeah, right? Like you've got to find, there should be in any organization, somebody who maybe thinks like you or maybe is interested in how you think, and you can kind of figure out within your own parameters, again, what's safe to try. I will also say there are a lot of measurement things that you can do as well. And we do that. We do marketing mix modeling. We do incrementality modeling, which is basically looking at what would the business have done versus what did it do. And we also look at like brand lift studies from our media partners and whatnot. And so there's no one piece that can tell me definitively your spend led to this. But when you start to triangulate those, it gets harder and harder for somebody to say, this isn't working, right? And then that's a business case that you can go and say, you gave me $20 million. Now I need $40 million, right? Like, how do you start building up the incremental wins?
Yeah, or ask for double the budget that you need and then hope that you get what you actually need, 50% of it. That was like my trick.
I love that.
That was my trick. I'd be like, I need 20 million, but really I needed 10. And I would negotiate and get my way. So there you go.
I'm like, in case our CFO is listening, I never do that.
You never heard this idea. But no, by the way, like when I was in the earlier days of my career, that's kind of, if I'm being honest, that was a resourceful thing I had to do. Like I was at these brands that demanded brand. Like we needed it. By the way, both, I would say, to your point, had fundamental curiosity and or an understanding that we needed it. Like that was a baseline. But all of these new forms of marketing and media were really new. So social and influencer and digital content and all of it, podcasts, everything was kind of like this wave in the last 15 years. Prior to that, you were really dealing with traditional marketing. You were dealing with email. You were dealing with very nascent web. It was a whole different, I think, ball game. And part of how, you said it really well, part of, I think, how I was able to influence was one, obviously through the numbers, right? And where you can find attribution and where you can even create different ways of measurement that everyone within the organization can align on and can be your form and your way of measuring brand, I think is step one. And then I think step two was being resourceful and fighting for it. Like, I think I talk about brand a lot as like I'm on a road show. My job as a brand builder, I think, is twofold. Obviously, it's to run the brand channels, right? So when you think about something like campaign that we've talked a lot about, my job is to develop and run campaign. But my job is also, I think, to build brand internally and get that internal buy-in. So every part of the organization is singing from that same like song, and we are all building this brand together. And I think that's where you have to like influence people to understand like, what is it that Tinder really stands for? And why are we unique? And what is our value prop? And what are we trying to build out into the world? So, brand is a little bit of like a center of excellence, and it's also a service, and it's also a channel. And I think it can be many things. And that sometimes has helped me to get things through and over the finish line, because I'll really align with my founder, with my partners, with my clients now on what it is, right? Is this in service of the overall organization? Is this in service of a channel? Is this in service of our team? Like, what am I serving through this? Because sometimes brand, to your point, should not be attributed. Like, if I'm in service of the internal organization, there's obviously no attribution that's going to come with that. There might be other KPIs, and I really try to think about what those things are and put some kind of goal to everything I do. But I also think it's funny, and I don't know if you would agree with this. I think some of the best moments in my career from a brand perspective, like the big wins, they were the ones that were never measurable. They were the ones that like we went on gut instinct. Now, yes, even on gut instinct, you have years of understanding your customer in your body, like in your mind, but your gut is coming from that level of experience. But they've been the ones that like I couldn't really explain in that way.
Yeah.
So I'm curious for you if like you've ever just taken a big swing and what that big swing moment was for you.
I really just want to acknowledge, I love what you're saying about brand as service because I agree. It's dangerous when you get a brand team who's like, we have a holy brand book and everybody should follow this, right? Your brand is not what's on a page.
No.
Your brand is what's in your product and how people are talking about you on social. And it's really important as a brand marketer to help everyone feel empowered to be a brand owner. And I agree, like you can showcase the value of brand isn't just, I can make your performance marketing more efficient. It's also going to the product team and saying like, we can actually get more focused, accelerate our impact if we, are leaning into our root strengths and our discriminator and positioning this in the right way, right? And so I 100% agree on, on what you're saying there. And look, in terms of swings, like I think there's stuff big and small that I'm really proud of. On the big side, launching our first global brand campaign, It Starts with a Swipe with Tinder. Like that was a big swing. Tinder had never done, it's crazy, after more than 10 years of existence.
Yeah.
Tinder had never done a truly global campaign. There were a lot of channels that Tinder had never tried, like CTV. There were actually a lot of internal debates that frankly were not easy conversations around a company that had a legacy of saying just buy the cheapest CPM media, kind of spray and pray with remnant media and a little bit of a race to the bottom on that and saying, actually, we're not going to do that. Like we're going to treat this as really beautiful, important, creative, kind of taking inspiration from fashion brands and that sort of thing and saying, we're going to go after some expensive sponsorships. Like we sponsored the Kardashians on Hulu. So you see a Tinder ad before you watch. Like that was a lot more expensive CPM than anything we'd ever done before. But it paid off because people actually pay attention to those premium platforms. And so, that took, I think, a lot of bravery. Now what I'm focusing on a lot, and I mean, you have so much experience of this, so I could definitely learn from you on this, is how do you give your brand the right stretch in social, especially, right? And for a while, we were trying to do all of these, I think, overwrought social things like let's come up with the perfect concept and then go find 10 influencers to execute it. And it was boring, right? Even when they're fun Tinder stories, like they're just boring. They're not that interesting. They feel forced. We've been doing much more of this is a cool creator who's up and coming. Let's just say, work with us and what do you want to make?
Yeah.
And like we're getting way better content out of it, right? And look, it's not as perfectly aligned with these are the 3 key narratives. This is the product I want you to launch, right? There's a role for that stuff too. But we're getting like, this, we worked with Tiana Robillard, who's this great girly influencer who she had a really high profile breakup. She came up with this green screen walking through her Tinder profile. It was during the demure trend. And she's like, I've got a 4.99 Uber rating, very demure, very cutesy, whatever. It was so funny and simple. Everybody in the comments was like, Tinder should pay you for this. Like they didn't even realize it was an ad. And, that was just really an unlock for me of sometimes you've got to just let go, right?
Yeah.
You've got to just let your brand have stretch, not overthink it and figure out what works.
It's funny because I think brand strategy in and of itself is a discipline. A lot of what it means to build a brand is actually saying no. And I feel like coming from the world of fashion, it was such a good like learning ground for this because fashion is incredibly disciplined. It's probably the place or the category where no is said the most, like high fashion, luxury, jewelry. No, 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 no. And the few yeses that remain are the brand. But I actually think most brands today, especially in the world we live in, this multifaceted multimedia world, I really think it's about creating the discipline, but then creating freedom within it. And I talk a lot about brand as like a freedom within a framework. The framework is not there to stifle us. The framework is there to guide us. And sometimes it guides you to something on the way outer rim of that brand strategy. And sometimes it guides you into the center. But ultimately, I think it's like what you said just now about that influencer or the creator you worked with. It was human, it resonated, it connected. It feels like there was something that really resonant about it. That is Tinder. It might not be in line with like the pillars that you've written for your content strategy, but it is in line with the human connection and the universality of dating, as we've talked about, right? So I think it's just such an interesting thing to really think about, like, how do you create, and by the way, you said it as my biggest fear and something I work on every day, but you were like, sometimes you have to like release control. How do you as a leader balance leading and directing and making sure that everything that goes out the door is at the quality you expect, but then also letting go and letting your team fly and letting those moments of spontaneity and creativity like really come to life?
Yeah. I've been really fortunate to work for a lot of really amazing servant leaders over the years. And a lot of people talk about Pepsi's amazing training grounds for marketing, which it is. It's also actually really amazing training grounds for leadership. And so there's a lot that I draw on from formal leadership training as well as just everybody that I've learned from. And, I have been through, I think, some combination of luck and people taking bets on me.
Yeah.
And I'd like to give myself some credit for talent as well.
Bit right in there. Yeah, me too.
That, for a while, early in my career, every job I rotated on at Pepsi, the person above me would go on leave. And it was like a joke, but it was actually amazing for me because I really got to stretch up and do things that I never should have been doing. Like, for example, in my mid-20s, my manager and the senior director above her both went on leave, and I was left as an associate brand manager running shopper marketing for all of PepsiCo for 7-Eleven. And like, I would be in meetings with VPs and C-suite, and it was me. And it's like crazy that they let me do that. But it was such a good learning experience. And so I say that because I really try to channel that and give my team those opportunities.
Such a good reminder.
Right?
Yeah.
I really have a core belief that people will rise to the occasion if you give them the right vision and context and parameters. And so I'm not a cakewalk to work for. Like, I have high expectations from my team, but I also have really high trust and belief that they're going to get there. And so that allows for kind of psychological safety, right? We can debate things. I trust that they're going to be that they have a real smart, informed point of view. And so, of course, our massive global campaigns, like, I'm super involved in those. Those cost a lot of money. There's no runway for us to get those wrong. But there's a lot that I'm like, okay, let's try it. And how do I just hire great people around me and help them think and ask the right questions and trust that the work is going to work?
It's such a powerful narrative, I think, an idea, which is like, how do you create space for people to stretch and flex? At Fahrenheit, we talk so much about championing potential. It's like a big thing I like wax poetic about all the time. Thank you so much. You're absolutely welcome to use it. And it's really this idea that, like, instead of focusing on people's weaknesses, or let's not even call them weaknesses, but like their areas of non-genius, right? How instead do I take their zone of genius and really use it and push it and foster it? And actually what gets created, and what I hope is get created, is that if you're in an environment where every person's strengths are being championed, which means you are pushing them in their areas in their zone of genius, it means that everyone feels empowered, excited, and successful. Because if I'm operating from my area of genius all the time, I'm likely crushing it, and crushing it feels really good. So what happens when everyone is feeling really good is that people are energized and they're inspired and they're excited. But I will say, and like, this is something that scares me also, in a service-based business, which I was on the other side of this seat, my whole career until building Fahrenheit, leading marketing internally, is that when we're dealing with clients, there's such a low bar for mistakes. One little mistake could be detrimental. And we are making a real promise to our clients and to our teams on the quality of everything we're going to deliver, that we have to kind of like create safe spaces where people can test and learn and try to fail, but it can't happen externally, right? Like, we don't have the space for that.
Totally.
It's a little bit of a different thing, and something that keeps me up at night is like, how do I balance those two worlds? But what's so interesting is what you said. When I was in my early days of my career, so similarly to you, I was always like the first on a team who never had a boss. Mine was because I grew up in the world of social. So I was the first ever hire at Guild Group for social. I was the first ever hire at Michael Kors for social. I built Michael Kors' social into a 60-person army, literally, like, worldwide. And I had never done anything like this, and neither had my bosses. You know, during our earnings report, like I would have to give a social media report to our CEO because no one spoke the language of social yet.
Yeah.
And I think you said it really well, which is it forced me to flex up. I remember one of my earliest like meetings with the big executives at Michael Kors. I like borrowed my sister, my twin sister worked for many years at Harper's Bazaar. And I like borrowed heels of hers to like look like an adult. I was like 22 years old, 24 years old, going into these executive meetings and having to literally like pretend. And I think the pretending in a lot of ways served me so well because it created this sense of power in trying. This ability of just like throwing out an idea, and sometimes you fail, sometimes it flops, and then sometimes it's a win. And how do you really like learn from the win? So I am really going to take that with me today. That's such a good reminder of like the power of how do you really give people the space to grow and to learn.
I mean, I loved your excited, empowered, successful, right? I think, yeah, if everybody, it's like a dream for me when there's a business need and it's somebody's passion and superpower, and you can put them in that role. It's like, yes, everybody wins. You know, it feels amazing.
I think something that I didn't know about, and I'm curious what you didn't know, something I did not know about being a senior level marketer, like 20 years into my career, I did not know how much you had to love building and running a team and cultivating talent. It is the thing that gives me the most joy, the thing that absolutely gives me the most energy, no question, hands down. Like I really love cultivating talent and hiring talent and putting people together and watching them create magic and letting them grow. But it was probably the one thing about being like a head of marketing I really did not know. Like I didn't know how much of my job would be that. And I'm so grateful that it is. But yeah, like I really had no idea.
I totally agree. As you rise through the ranks, it's interesting that marketing kind of becomes less and less of your job, and like the head of or chief part, right, is what takes over. And you have to think about, how do I design this org properly? How do I foster the right space for people? But I agree, it's so rewarding to be able to, you know, foster an environment where, I mean, I always feel great about like, wow, I'm putting out work that I'm proud of, but it feels even better when there are people who are saying, I think this is the best work I've ever done, right? Like that's the type of team you want to be a part of.
Definitely. You know, something you said, which was like, you were talking about the campaign that you got off the ground, the first global campaign for Tinder. And you said, you know, it comes with a lot of bravery. So I guess my last question for you is really like, how do you navigate being brave? And as a marketer, sometimes the answer is right in front of you and it's obvious and there's data to back it up. And sometimes you're taking bets and you're taking risks on people, on projects, on campaigns. How do you really face that fear, you know, in order to make bold moves?
It's a great question. And it's something I find myself really focused on right now, as a lot of people probably do, because the world is so polarized and what's happening with the economy. It's totally natural for people to go, oh gosh, I'm just going to go to the known playbook. But I actually find myself going, we got to try something. Like, I think the only way out is through. Like, you better be trying something new and experimenting. Like I said, I've been at this company for 6.5 years. So I do have a fair amount of relationship equity and trust, but I've also just found I have to trust my own gut. I have to do what I believe is right for the business. And, you know, again, over the course of my career, you know, you talking about wearing heels. When I look back on that 7-Eleven job, I'm like,
no, what were they thinking?
What were they thinking?
No, I think it's crazy.
Yeah, right? And it's like, you fake it until you make it. And frankly, and that job, I really learned I didn't have time to second guess myself.
Yeah,
like,
me too.
You have to just do it. And I find myself channeling that a lot right now. Like, just can't second guess. You gotta take a bet and hope that it pays off. And frankly, you know, I've unfortunately seen a lot of marketing leaders and business leaders who I love and respected get fired over the sake of their careers. But you know what? Then they go on and they do really cool stuff somewhere else that's a better fit, who likes their bravery. And so, you know, I think you have to just stay true to you, do what you think is going to be right for the customer and the business, and hope for the best.
Yeah. It's also about the story you tell, like what you just said, which is for a marketer or a career executive who like gets fired because they make a mistake. I don't even know what that means, but they make a mistake. Maybe what that shows is that they are a risk taker, and maybe a company that values risk takers is really where they should be. So it's this interesting thing of like finding your own voice and finding your own story, I think, as a marketer. For me, I know, and I really realized this. So I had been at Sweetgreen for a little over 3 years, and I had gone there to build the brand. Like that was my job, was come in. Sweetgreen had 6 or 7 stores in this tiny little pocket of the Northeast. And I had been so deeply inspired by the founders. I had met them on a personal level. We became friends. A year later, they were bringing in this incredible woman as the new president. I think Karen was the president. And they said to me, we brought in this president, you have to meet her. And I met her, and I was sweating through my shirt the entire time. She was the scariest person I had ever met, literally. And I was like, I have to work for her. Like, I am going to walk into the fire and get burned for this woman. And I ended up going to Sweetgreen. And I think that, for me, after my journey and my time there, I came to this realization of I'm a builder. I am a builder who loves to build the brand, raise the brand, sit at the intersection between creative strategy and marketing. And that is my sweet spot. And when we were facing this next phase of growth for Sweetgreen, which was going to be we had to hit 80 plus stores, it was time for a different type of leadership. I really knew it wasn't me. And I think that next phase of growth didn't excite me and light me up in the way that the build does. When you're still a little bit of the underdog, but you have enough ammunition behind you to be able to really grow. And so I think it's interesting because it's part, I think being a great marketer is part taking the bets and the leaps, having what you said, which I really loved, where you're like, I'm not a walk in the park to work for. Like, love that. Amazing. I think I would agree, probably, like high expectations and a high set of values for sure. But I think it is like this combination of things and then figuring out what is right for you. And like, you've found your own product market fit, like in the dating app space, literally both with your partner and your job. So
yeah, right. You said zone of excellence and putting your people in their zone of excellence. You got to do that for yourself too, right? You have to find the companies and the roles that align what you do well and just lean into it.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for this amazing conversation.
Thank you, Farryn. This was so fun.
We could chat marketing truly all day. Literally. Nothing I love talking about more. Thank you so much.
Thank
you. It was awesome.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Fahrenheit Podcast. If you loved this episode or learned something new, be sure to subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or anywhere you get your podcasts. See you next time.